I think I'm up to, I think I just finished session 9 yesterday, so I still got 4 more to go through.
Okay.
One of the things that it really, a couple of things that you said there really jumped out at me. And the first was asking God to show you how he views you, which maybe I've thought of that before, but this time it really, really resonated with me to say, go and find out, have him tell you what he thinks of you. So I thought, okay, that this is going to be good. The second thing that you said was to ask yourself, look at everything that you know about God, or you think you know about God, and then ask yourself, how much did you get from personal revelation and by interacting with him? And then how much did you get hearing what somebody else taught, or somebody's sermon, or a book you read? And I thought, well, I can take a lot of stuff that I know and just chuck it out because it's all secondhand information. It was not one-on-one. And I've done a lot of teaching over the years and got a ton of information stuff that I've written. And people say, oh, you really need to write a book. You really need to write a book. And there was always a certain amount of hesitation that I had. And part of it was just like, I don't know if I could really do this, all the things you tell yourself. But there was always something about me that was just sort of like, yeah, I just don't think something's not quite right. And when you said that, that's what really clicked. I'm like, because I had said something to a friend of mine who's a publicist, and I said, does the world really need another Christian book about this topic? There's so much out there. Part of the reason I'm saying, what is the purpose of just writing another book that, gets added into people's collections? But that thing of when you said that was like, how much do you know that is personal revelation as opposed to secondhand acquired information? And it was like, I think that's what, was ultimately where the not freedom to go ahead and let's do this. And I'm saying, okay, Lord, I think that's why there was always a certain amount of dis-ease on my part to do something. And now I have a name for it in terms of, do I just want to parrot what I've heard, or am I going to be really expressing something that I've learned from you? So that was like a real wow eye-opener, and saying, oh, thank you, Lord, that I did not, that I listened to that somewhat of that hesitation and didn't go through with some things, because it just would have been rehashing stuff that I heard and not what I had learned from him directly. So those were 2 really good things. I also recently got a free book, and the guy who wrote it is someone, when I was part of a writers organization here, he came as a speaker, and he's a well-known writer in this area, but he does a lot of ghostwriting for people. So you wouldn't really know his name, but he's written a lot of people's books or worked with them. And he was, in this one, I think this is the book, The Restless God. And he's talking about people that have God in a box. And you were talking about this, that when we get so locked into who we think God is, and we can't see outside of that box. And he was sharing that when he and his wife were very, very young believers, they wanted to have kids, but she had a heart condition. And so when she got pregnant, they went to the doctor, and they were told, well, because of her heart condition, they didn't know if she was going to be able to actually have the child, but there was also some problems with the child itself that they were able to determine. So when they told her mother about what had happened, the mother said, well, I know this little church, and they really believe in healing. I'm going to go and ask them to pray for you, which the mother did. They go back for the doctor's appointment, and everything is fine. No problem with the heart, no problem with the baby. This pregnancy is going to be good. So they're really excited. They go and they tell their pastor what has happened. And his response to them is, that other group is a cult. You need to get out of there. You don't need to do this. And they're like, but we have this wonderful report. And it was all like, no, you don't want to go there. And so they found that they were just, where they had been very active in their church, all of a sudden people were just like disassociating and stepping back, and they weren't being invited. And they're brand new believers. And they're like, wow, I mean, fortunately, it did not destroy their faith, but they were just really struggling with, why is this happening? I mean, here God's done something, and now we're being told, don't get involved because this is a cult. And he also shared where, because he does a lot of ghostwriting, he was approached by his publisher to work, and he never names names, but evidently this is someone who was very, very well known, who wanted to do a book on the book of Revelation. And of course, he wanted Cease to be, really doing the ghostwriting behind it. And Cease was like, well, he was just talking to the guy, and he said, well, I used to believe what you're putting forth at one time, but I don't believe it anymore. And the guy just got really irate and like, how can you not believe like me? And, and so ultimately he doesn't wind up working with the guy, but it was sort of like the danger of when you get into this little box of this is how it is. And, whether, and the guy was saying, hey, I've been to, he's been to seminary, he's got all this training, I know what I'm talking about, but Cease is going, but, I just don't believe that anymore. And the total shutdown that, that the guy went through, and of course he realized he couldn't work with him because, I think he felt that even if he didn't believe the same way the guy did, but if they could have a working relationship, yeah, he would write the book or try to help the guy. But because he got shut down so completely, it was like, hey, I just cannot do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. So to see how that headset can really mess us up if we just get so locked into this is the way it is, and there's nothing else to discuss, this is the final word, and it's like, well, maybe not. But one other thing I wanted to ask you, and I haven't gotten to this point in the series, is when you're talking about all the things from quantum physics, being able to walk through a wall, being able to change the composition of something. So my question is, and I'm not asking you how to do it, I'm saying, would something like this be possible where if and when the Lord shows you how to do something, if you were placed in a situation, could you, by changing either the frequency or what's going on, actually render a weapon useless?
Yes. I mean, the answer, yeah, definitely. Because part of the issue is not believing, one. So, yeah, okay. So do I believe that that's possible? Yes. Do I know how to do it? Well, yes, in various ways. Obviously, one is using the authority that you have to render what's going on harmless.
Okay.
The other thing is actually, changing the reality of where actually, even if someone did fire a weapon, then it would pass right through me, because I have chosen that reality where I'm aligning my frequency to allow it to pass through. So, and I think sometimes if you know that nothing is impossible with God, and that you are be able to choose realities and not be subject to them, then there is no-go areas at all. And hence, my testimonies of changing airplane flight times and opening unlocked doors and padlocks and things, simply because I chose the reality and then saw it manifest. Our illustrations of that, trans-relocating, traveling, in shorter time periods, expanding time, contracting time. They're all part of choosing. But these things are under my control and authority as a son of God, and I am not subject to them.
Okay.
A testimony of that would be a lady who was tracking along with these things, driving along in her car. I can't remember whether she had anyone else with her, but I think possibly did. And she goes across an intersection where the lights are correct, and a truck basically comes straight across, and she sees it coming, and whatever she chose at that point in time, it was not, oh no, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And the truck passed right through the car, like supernaturally through the car.
Yeah.
Came out the other side, and it was actually caught on traffic cam. And
Ooh.
they were like, whoa, what is this?
Yes.
Basically.
Okay. Okay.
Because at that point, and the key is taking captive the thought and aligning it with the reality that you're choosing to believe,
Okay.
rather than, oh no, this has happened, panic,
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
unbelief, doubt, which comes at that point. Is this possible? And if you go down the route of, oh, I'm not sure, then
Yeah.
usually you're then in subject to whatever's going on. So we have to learn to see from a different level of reality, which is aligned with what we know that about the truth of who God is, who we
Mm-hmm.
are, and God's intention and our inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
So if anything is stopping that, then I have every right to manifest whatever it takes to enable something not to affect me, or for me to actually have a positive effect on it and change it.
Okay.
So yeah, I know how. I know that the way you do it is by your observation to change the reality to align with what you're seeing, not what is actually there.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
have to be able to see what the reality you are choosing to
Mm-hmm.
manifest as a bigger reality than what you're actually presently experiencing.
Yeah. Okay.
Otherwise, quantum physics effectively, if many realities exist and you
Mhm.
don't choose one, then the current one continues.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you got to choose a
One
reality
take.
which replaces the current one. And what happens is, quantum physically, the photons, which everything is a wave until it becomes a particle, and it becomes a particle when it's observed.
Okay.
So there are waves of possibility out there that when you observe them and come into an agreement with that reality, then that reality becomes manifested. All the photons begin to come together, and all the other photons, basically possibilities, fade away until only this one exists. And then that actually is what begins to happen. Most
Oh.
people do not have the ability to hold on to that reality in face of facts. So
Okay.
they may see facts, and those facts override what they're choosing. And so the reality they really want to see never manifests, because the facts actually are what actually they're observing, which is
Okay.
why you've got to take your eye off the problem and look at the solution for the actual solution to begin to manifest and then change the problem.
Okay.
And people have not learned to focus their consciousness to do it, which is why, I started the whole thing off with meditation and learning to come from a place of peace, love, joy, peace, rest.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in a place of rest, whatever's going on does not disrupt your ability to align with what you know is consistent with the love of God and the kingdom of God. Um,
Okay.
but it's the point of choice, which is always the key.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is I've just finished up. Joe's got one more to do. Because we went through the class with the sheriff's department, we had opportunities to ride with deputies.
Hmm.
And you're in the car, and whatever the call is, they have to respond to it. Now, when I worked in the 911 center, when I did my 2 rides, I went ahead and preemptively prayed peace over the county. So I had, to a real degree, very, very peaceful encounters. There wasn't a whole lot of craziness. But when you're in the car with the deputy, you really find out from them, in the event that something goes really wrong, what are your instructions to me? Because they're responsible for having you in the car. What do you want me to do? And so when I asked the first one, he goes, well, there is a machine gun up above you. And there was, attached to the car. Well, but he was joking. I mean, he was joking. He goes, well, there is a machine gun. I'm like, I don't think so. Because I wouldn't have known. He did show me the button where I could unlock it. I mean, I guess if I had to unlock it and just pull it down but he's like, no. He said, just get out of the car and run. we'll come find you. Don't get involved. And I was okay with that. You know, it just said, hey, Friday night when I was riding with the sergeant, and this was a much more active because of the type of work that they do. They are looking for speeders, drunk drivers, people without seatbelts. I mean, that's all they do. And so you are there watching the whole time. So we were all night long stopping people and things like that, which gave me the real feeling of like when you have a traffic stop and they are walking up, you know, they can pull up the registration. They know who owns the car. It will give them a heads up if this person has had any kind of a violent past, just as a FYI. But when you walk up, you have no idea who is in that car and what's going to go wrong. Unfortunately, nothing went wrong. We did have one guy who was so stoned that fortunately his back taillights weren't working, and he got pulled over for that, and they got him off the street because before the stop was over, he was so zonked, he was falling asleep on his feet. And had he been driving, it would have been really bad news. But so when I asked this, well, when Joe had ridden, this is a special group, it's called HEAT, which the acronym is that everyone calls us hand everyone a ticket, which is not what it means. When he gets into the car, there's a pump shotgun next to the seat. And so he says, he asks Philip, you know, what's this for? And it's like, well, hey, look, if there's a problem, you know, and I get into trouble, just rack the gun and come out. So when I get in the car, there's no pump shotgun. And so and this is the guy's boss that I'm riding with. He's the head of the unit. And I said, okay. I said, where's the pump shotgun? He goes, well, there's two of them in a machine gun in the space behind your seat and the cage. He goes, but my 9mm is here in the console. It's my ankle gun, but I can't wear it because I need to get a new holster. And so I said, okay, look, in the event that something goes really, really bad, I said, I would not be comfortable not doing anything. And just, if you're in trouble, what can I do to help? And so he went through some things and he said, look, here's how you work the radio. This is how you call into dispatch. This is what you do. So whenever he gets out of the car, the doors are automatically locked. He said, so you're locked in the car, you know, you are to a degree safe. The car is designed that when I stop it, I institute a safety mechanism that even if somebody can get in the car will not drive away. So no one is going to take you for a ride. He said, however, he said, if the person comes and you know, I'm disabled and they start coming to the car, he said, get out of the car and run. But before you run, grab my 9mm. Now, he didn't say it so that I would shoot the gun. He said, because it's in the console, someone could easily find it. Please take it with you and run. Don't do anything. Just get as far away as you can. We'll come find you, but please take this if somebody can't get it. But my whole thought was, okay, now it didn't happen, but I was thinking, but Lord, if I saw something like that happening, could I, and how, you know, and if it was possible, how could I intervene without even leaving the car and start to shift the situation that both parties are at least alive at the end of this, and there's minimal damage that is done, you know, that it does not result in a shooting or something like that. How could I do that, and what should I do?
Okay. Whatever God says is the answer. Yeah.
But I was looking at it from that point of view of like, hey, could I change the reality of, if this person has a weapon, could I change the reality that it wouldn't fire, that the molecular structure would change that would prevent it from firing? Because the guy I'm riding with is not a believer by any stretch of the imagination.
Anything, yes. You can do any of those things. It's just choosing one instinctively at that point.
Okay.
If you it's that point which is always the situation.
Okay.
You can prepare ahead of time, as you say, preparing, sending out angels, you know, sending out an atmosphere of peace, all that's done. You can also overshadow the situation with your spirit. So you can surround the situation with your spirit and release an atmosphere or a frequency into that atmosphere. You know, when you're engaging it, that's another aspect to it. So you can do things in preparation. You can do things, you know, in an immediate setting. But then when it comes to the choice, You've got to make that choice, and
First.
there will be no other choice for you.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be double-minded. That's instability, and nothing will manifest other than what
Okay.
is going to manifest. So
Okay.
it's always that point, which is why fear is one of the biggest obstacles for people to actually live this way, because they allow fear to come in, and that creates a double-mindedness rather than the love of God, who you know has got is best for you and wants the best for you, and you
Yeah.
can choose the realities which align with that.
Yeah.
It's always that point, take captive every thought.
Okay.
That's the key for everybody in every situation.
Yeah.
What are they going to do at that moment? And do you have sufficient uh, ability to see a reality at that moment that you can choose? And that's why the
Okay.
rewiring of the brain to be non-linear and to not just respond to and react to whatever's going on, but to be able to see other possibilities. Now, in most of the occasions, you're not faced with a split second, I need to change this instant.
Yeah.
That's not usually the
Yeah.
scenario, but it's still always an occasion where you are faced with a choice on what you're going to do about anything. And
Okay.
that's the key, when you must see what are the alternative realities here that I can choose,
Okay.
and which
Okay.
one am I going to choose? And of course, there are multiple ones that will produce the same results at the end of the day. So
Okay.
it's not just one, oh no, I can't think of what it is. There's
Yeah.
there's multiple things which are possibilities that all exist for any situation that you face.
Hmm.
And which one you align yourself with quantum physically will begin to actually come into manifestation when there none others exist. And the part of the problem is people have continual multiple things that could exist, and they're therefore not able to focus into one.
Okay.
And usually
Okay.
distractions and fear or other doubt, unbelief, other things can actually come in to that choice and then cause you not to be able to see a different reality. I mean, I had a situation where I was traveling with my daughter, and I was taking her to the train station, and we ended up in a big traffic jam. They've put roadworks and traffic, and it unexpectedly, and it's a 30, probably usually a 45-minute drive, and I allowed a good hour, but we got stuck in this traffic jam for a good 35 minutes. so so basically we had very little time to get the rest of the journey done.
Yeah.
And my daughter's in the car sitting in the traffic jam, basically
Hmm.
saying, oh, I'm not going to get the train, we're going to miss the train, oh
Hmm.
no, I can't afford to get another ticket, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I listen to her, or do I look and say, no, I'm choosing the reality where you'll get there? So that's what I said to her. I just said, no, it's okay. Don't worry. Don't be concerned. We'll get there. But she was agitated, and
Hmm.
she, obviously, naturally speaking, couldn't see a way we were going to get there.
Yeah.
So at that point, I've got to ignore the distraction of the reality of the situation, in which we're never going to get 30 miles in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Even if I could drive at 120 mile an hour, it just would never happen. Because basically we still had all this traffic that we were in this queue, and they were all ahead of us,
Yeah.
slowing down. So it was never even going to be a quick trip after that. So I just had to focus. Okay, I'm not going to listen to the fear that's coming from her. I am not going to look at this situation naturally. I am going to choose the reality that we will get there. And so we continued along the way, and we got to a point where we needed to be there. It was like, we're not there, and we need to be there, and we're miles away from where we should be. And we ended up being there. Like, we were there. She couldn't fathom it, because we were just there. She caught the train, and there was no trouble. And all the sort of double-mindedness, other possibilities often crowd out our ability to focus our thinking and choose to see that manifest. Sometimes when you do it instinctively, instinctive, and you don't have the time to be. And that's what we want to do. We want to create our consciousness that we live in a state of rest, and out of that state of rest, we can then rule and begin to choose the creative possibilities that we have within us, to choose. And I guess, you sort of practice, but nothing really always totally prepares you for the moment where you've got to make a choice.
Yeah, yeah. And riding with them, you got to see how fast, because he was former military, and he said, hey, in the military, he goes, and he was down in Panama when Noriega was there and involved in some sort of special operation. He didn't go into a lot of detail, but he said down there, he goes, the difference is in the military, if you're in a conflict situation, it's shoot and ask questions later. He said, as a law enforcement officer, there is certain criteria that you have to, on the fly, very quickly assess while you were in this unfolding situation. What do I get? Is the use of force justifiable? There's certain criteria by law. And he said that all has to run through your head in a split-second decision. What do I do? So it was really a chance to see how fast things could go very, very wrong, and how if you're out there on your own, which a lot of times they are, if anything, boy, do they really need the protection of God, because, like when I was riding with him, he was to his degree very specific where he would pull someone over, where they would stop. It was a well-lighted area. There was a lot of traffic. It's like you weren't out there by yourself. Now, you can't always do that, but this was specific. And I knew in this route that he was doing was so I'm supposed to be back in 911 on New Year's Eve. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pray over the county for New Year's Eve. And then I'm going to go in there and I'm going to sit there and watch as this unfolds, because I'm believing because they said that it's usually a real madhouse. And I'm going to go in there and I'm believing it's going to be a very, very peaceful New Year's. Because he even told me when I said, well, I'll be in there, he goes, you'll hear me all the time. He said, you'll see me on the screen. He said, I'll be busy. And I know what his number is, so I know who to look for. And I thought, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised to find out that it's not going to be what you think it's going to be, because I intend to go in there ahead of time and just prepare the way. And I've been doing that a lot, just praying over the county, praying over them, that there isn't the uproar, that they are not in bad situations. The guy that Joe rode with the shotgun, he is a believer. And so Joe had a chance to impart to Philip, and Philip is a very strong believer. I don't think he could tell him about changing reality. That might be a little outside of the box.
So Joe was actually in reality riding shotgun.
He literally was riding shotgun.
Riding shotgun. So.
Which, racking a shotgun to me was a whole lot easier than taking out an M16 and trying to figure out, like, no, thank you. Because I said to him, I said, is this M16 loaded? He goes, oh, yeah. He said, now they have it there in case they get thrown into a really crisis situation where they need something. It's just there. And those weapons were pretty much covered up in the back. You wouldn't have known they were there unless you knew where to get them. But it was a small handgun that he would not want to let anyone get to. It's like, I said, look, you don't want me trying to shoot this gun. I've only done it a few times. I'm not a good shot. He said, just take it, get it out of the car and leave with it, and I'll come find you later. But working with them was the idea of how hard that job is. And between traffic stops and domestics are the two worst things they can go on, because they're the two things that can go so bad so fast. The prayer protection that they need, and then the protection that the county needs to change the atmosphere in the whole county, that everything here starts to change.
Sure. And I think there's levels of authority that you begin to exercise and begin to build, and you then maybe have to deal with some of the other things that are in the spiritual mix of the dynamic, various things that go on. Eventually you look at the atmosphere, what's going on in the atmosphere. Is there a prevailing atmosphere of fear or racism or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Because eventually you've got to change the culture of the whole thing, and that might require court cases, and it might require looking into what the roots and history are and dealing with some of that. But
Okay.
so in the bigger picture, there's probably quite a lot that
Yeah.
needs looked at. But you know, you're starting out in, look, I'm going to do what I can do,
Yeah.
and I believe that peace. No, there's no end to the increase of God's government and peace. So everyone has a mandate to bring peace. You don't need a specific one. There is a
Yeah.
there is a mandate which is attached to the government of God, which is for peace. And that can be broken down into actual peace of no conflict, war, whatever, but also peace in terms of wholeness and no fragmentation. And that can
Yeah.
be individual within a person, but also corporately within a community. But it does require someone to obviously begin to start taking the responsibility and start doing it. And someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is then learning to be able to focus and see those things, in a reality. And I think we can't just change anything attached to anybody, because people
Yeah.
do have free will and choice.
Right.
But there is a lot we can do when it's within our sphere.
Yeah.
If it's affecting us, then that gives us a mandate to deal
Yeah.
with affecting us. And then there are obviously other specific mandates that we can be given to deal with other things.
Yeah.
But it is it's one of those things that the deconstruction of the mind is a key process, both in obviously the dealing with belief systems which limit us, theological positions which make the increase of violence and thing as an expectation, which is
Mhm.
where the theological position of futurist revelation and all that tribulation
Yeah.
stuff will come in,
Yeah.
because there's no expectation that things are going to get better from that doom and gloom eschatology. So the deconstruction of belief systems which are tied into things which reaffirm the negative things are key to us believing that we can do something, which is a challenge. It is a challenge, because so many people just are so ingrained with those ways of thinking
Yeah.
that they're expecting more bad stuff to happen. They're
Yeah.
not expecting things to get better.
Yeah.
Well, if you believe things are going to get worse, it's very difficult to choose a reality in which they're going to get better, because they're totally contradictory to your belief system.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that's why the deconstruction of the theology behind some of these situations is important, because it gives you then a foundation for choosing an alignment with, hey, we need to see things get better. We need to see peace come into our communities and all the other things, and nations, coming together and becoming one family rather than these disparate people falling out, all that stuff. There are underlying theological and doctrinal positions which will just hinder anyone going down that route, which
Yeah.
is why, the mindset of, the pastor who could not believe that God would heal somebody just
Yeah.
shows how ingrained, and to call another church who prayed for healing a cult just
Yeah.
shows how strong those theological differences and viewpoints are within the general Christian community, which is
Okay.
why not that much is changing, because the prevailing view of the majority of those who have any sort of level of authority as believers is all aligned with things getting worse rather than better,
Yeah.
and
And please come
maintaining
quickly.
the bad things.
Yeah. And so please come quickly and get me out of here.
Yeah,
So I'll end with this, because I know I want to hear what's going on with James and Janice. But we are going to Tennessee this weekend, and no, we are not moving there. So I just thought I'd let you know
just
we are
before I
going
get
for the
that one in.
weekend.
She
Yeah.
seems
So
to be
before
spending
you,
a lot of time going there, though, doesn't she? I mean,
no,
it's
no, this
obviously
this
drawing.
Well, actually, what it is they posted that they were going to do a worship night on Friday night, and two of the people who were going to be there, who now live in Tennessee, were people that I played with before when we were all down here in Georgia. Well, since I'm out of school, I can take the free time to be able to go and do something. When I'm in school, because of the homework level, I can't. So we decided that we were going to do this. So I just want to let you know we are going to Tennessee. We are not moving there, but I figured you'd get a good laugh out of it. So now I will mute myself, and I want to hear from James and Jan.
Okay. All right. Hiya. So how's things going?
How are you guys?
In the continent of South America, so.
South America.
South America. Colombia.
Yes.
Colombia, yeah.
So many things going on. I'll let her go.
Well, I'll start with the last time we spoke. We were preparing ourselves to go to a place called Yaramall, and it is per capita the Alzheimer's capital of the world. So people have like a 50% chance sort of either ending up with Alzheimer's or ending up taking care of someone who has Alzheimer's. And we went there to assist the church in revival and to really pray for change in that place. And it was a most wonderful experience. We were there for 4 nights, and we had services morning and evening. And it was the last day.
Saturday.
Yeah, the very last day on Saturday in the morning prayer, the Spirit of the Lord broke out so strongly in that place. And the only word I can use is possessed. There was a young lady there who was totally possessed with the Spirit of the Lord. And she began to prophesy and to speak in first person from the Lord, and how, he was going to change things there, and how the people were going to experience his love in a most unusual way, and this is all that they needed. And it was so much to the prophecy. It was actually about 45 minutes long. And of course, while she was prophesying, others were being put up in the Spirit, and so much was going on all around her prophecy. And James was able to actually record the whole thing on his phone.
Audio portion.
The audio portion of it. And there was a young lady with us who was actually with James interpreting everything that she said, because we didn't know the language that well. And I'm telling you, Mike, it was an experience that I've never had before, never seen that type of activity that strong. And it was just.
And there were instructions that the Lord gave in the midst of this. Actually, the message was divided into 3 parts. The first one was to the church, and then the second one was to individuals, and then the last one was a personal one to her. But it was a powerful time, a time of change for that body. And so we're excited. We're praying that it's like, how do you receive it? And that's the question, because the pastor there has to make a decision as to how to embrace this, because we do know that when we embrace that kind of change, it's going to be a huge change for the body, and a lot of different things will probably happen, which I'm sure you're aware of as a result of that kind of intervention by the Lord. We were hoping for this, we were praying for this, so from that point of view, it was expected, but it still was a surprise. Yeah, we had a full, I think it started almost in the beginning of the service, and we didn't get out of there until a lot later on, but still it was powerful, and we're still trying to understand everything in its entirety. But my question to the pastor has been, how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do?
Because it's very much different from what they're used to, and they've not had that type of spirit breaking in on their services. The pastor himself was out for a while, laid flat out on the floor. I heard the microphone drop. I mean, it dropped twice, boom, and then another time, boom. The first time he was standing up, the second time he was down with the microphone, and was totally out. And at one point he tried to get up, and James and Charlie went to help him up, and he was just like dead weight on them. I just saw him so limp over there. They were literally holding this man up, but he was hearing from God as well, and he was getting his own message, his own perception from the message, and it was a lot going on, and it was very powerful.
We want it to happen again. So
Sounds
part
great.
of that. Yeah.
Sounds great. And in a sense, you've been engaging for this, and in a sense, legislating it and carrying it and releasing it, and keep legislating around the pastor's decisions, because having experienced something, obviously, that's a good positive step for allowing that to become something that God does. But the danger, obviously, is lose of control. Always the issue when it comes to those sort of things. Am I going to lose control? Am I going, and that comes down to the flesh. So, as part of that is, helping him to have the courage to give up control to God and allow God to take things forward the way he wants to do it. Which, is not always easy to do for people if they're coming from, an old mindset and a mindset of, pastors being, in control basically, and knowing what's going on, and but hopefully, if you continue to encourage and support around it, that change will continue to take place, and hopefully eventually you'll be able to bring them into not just the manifestations of the Spirit in physical presence, but them coming into a manifestation of engaging in the realms of heaven and having experiences which open up even more. But, a pastor's never going to open up to that if they're not willing to let God have control of the situation, because that's really risky for people. Oh, all my people can hear God for themselves. Oh, I know, I'm out of a job, or yeah.
We were really hoping that that he would continue the services. My mind went back to Pensacola when Steve went there to just preach on that Father's Day, and the service was just supposed to go that day, and then it went the next night and it continued on. I really felt that that's what could have happened, and really probably was supposed to have happened, because that's how powerful it was. And he didn't continue it. He didn't invite us even back, at all. And that's sort of discouraging to know.
You just got to keep engaging with God around it and seeing what he's saying to you. And of course, you don't have to be physically present to be able to release things into the atmosphere or call for the angels to visit or administrate into it. If you feel that's what God's mandating you to do, don't step outside of any boundaries that you've got, but do whatever you can do within it to facilitate God's purpose within it, to open up people for it.
Yeah. The Lord said that their mindset, the mindset of the church, was that they are a small congregation, a little church, insignificant. That's their mindset. And God is saying that with his presence and love, that he's changing that. That's something he actually laid out what he's doing would do, but they'll have to embrace that. And it's totally amazing. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Now, the other thing there are two things. One, I didn't want to respond and sort of chime in on Mary's encounters with the Atlanta police as a ride-along. That is so interesting, because I had a dream, and I'm in heaven driving a car, and I've become aware of this, and I get to its traffic light, but I'm saying, I don't know, what do you do in a foreign place? This is my question to myself. And I look to my right, and what did I see? But a police car. So I'm saying, what should I do? And as I pause and wait, the hat that he has on, a badge, a sheriff badge, appeared on it. Then I have this question about, should I turn to my right, to my left, or go straight? Then I asked that question, I think a second time, I had multiple alternatives. could have turned to my right, left, gone diagonally, but then I waited longer, then I had another set of alternatives to deal with. So I guess there's a connection between not making a choice or looking at it from the point of view that, oh, what should I do and how do I do it? Other alternatives sort of generate for somehow. Maybe that has some kind of connection with what you're talking about in terms of the quantum mechanical end.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things are at that point of choice. You know, that's the key. What do you choose when you're at that point where you got a decision? How are you going to be led by the Spirit in that rather than by the soul? And you know, the more your mind is deconstructed, the more possibilities exist within the framework of your thinking. Then you don't think naturally; you think possibilities supernaturally all the time. You know, and that's the key. You know, so the more we encounter those possibilities and experience the realities of heaven and the other realms and all the things that, then the more time we spend there, the more that will shape our thinking while we're here. And obviously, if you live in dual realms, then you can always be there flowing to here, which is ultimately the, you know, what God wants, is to live there and live there in a multiple sense, and to be here and flow from there to here and be a manifestation of there to here and see heaven manifested on earth through us as gateways, you know. And the more time we spend focusing on a heavenly perspective of life here, the more we will be able to see the possibilities of heaven's things rather than an earthly view. Most people only see from their natural eyes and from their experience of life. The more you engage heaven, the more the heavenly perspectives begin to shape how you see things and see the world. So when you look at a situation, immediately it's possible to change this, to do this, not, oh no, you know, disaster's taken place, this is going to happen. And, you know, and fear is always the sort of indicator that we're seeing things from an earthly perspective rather than a heavenly one, because God is never fearful of anything. And, you know, in the heart of God, it's all now, and therefore nothing is beyond the realms of dealing with it, you know, from the now, because all the possibilities that exist now and every scenario that could exist, God is living in the now and has a solution if we're willing to embrace it, you know. Because that's why he wants to bring good out of every situation, because they're all the possibilities that exist to deal with our choices and the choices of other people affecting us are all in that moment, if you like. But if we look at it from the natural perspective, then we usually choose to go down the fear route rather than, well, hey, the heart of God in this is coming from a total position of love, joy, and peace. Therefore, we can all flow out of that position and start to make choices which are aligned with that which is going to bring good out of every situation, not bad. But it means beholding him a lot more, so that when we behold everything else, we see it from the perspective that he does, not the natural one. You know, and the more we behold him, the more we become like him, the more we think like he does. You know, having the mind of Christ is really, it doesn't mean we have Jesus's brain. It means that we have the ability to think like a son, to think like an anointed one, to think like one who has authority in situations. And therefore, you know, Jesus didn't have a problem with the storm. It was like, hey, peace be still. The disciples had a major problem with the storm, because they're like, and they even criticized Jesus because he didn't care for them. It's like, oh, you don't care about us, you're going to let us die, you know. And it's just like, because you're only looking at it from the perspective of your natural view. You're not seeing this from heaven's perspective. You're not seeing it through the lens even of Jesus's words of we're going to the other side. But you've allowed all these things to actually come over. And Jesus was like at total rest, because there's no way that boat was going to sink.
Right.
you know, and they were all going to perish. It was never going to happen. So it was a very simple thing for him to say to the elements, be still. You know, interestingly, it's like, well, who was he speaking to? What was he speaking to?
Mm.
You know, and that's an interesting question that I've been pondering a while about. How does creation respond to us? How does creation long for something? How does creation groan for something? What is there within creation that is able to respond to Jesus's thing to the wind to stop?
Yeah.
Now, he didn't rebuke it, so he wasn't talking to a demon or a spirit. But what was he to? What responded in the wind?
Mm.
So there's a whole issue of, you know, are there elemental things that are part of the fabric of creation that are supposed to respond to our sonship and come into an agreement for things, and maybe they are swayed by other forces, and you find Wiccans and witches and though are engaging those elemental forces, whatever they might be, and using them generally for bad. And I was talking to a friend a while ago, and they were doing a court case over the hurricane that was coming into the US. I think it came into the southern areas of the US back in, was it, I don't know, earlier on the year. And they did a court case and were expecting something, accusers to come, and some elemental spirit of the wind turned up to say that actually this was a deliberate ploy and which they had come into agreement with. And it's almost like they're neutral, but can be swayed one way or another by whoever carries the greatest authority. So Jesus obviously carried a greater authority than the spirit behind that was operating possibly in legion, because there was a whole load of them operating, not wanting Jesus to come and cast them out. Because immediately Jesus turns out, what was their reaction? Oh, don't send us to the abyss. You know, we're frightened of you. Send us here. Well, all that must have been operating, which then caused the wind to respond to that and create a storm. So he then spoke to the wind and brought the wind, that element, back into alignment with peace. So that's just throwing that one out there for you. And the elementals, you know, the elementals, whatever they are, the Greek word for it is stoichion, as mentioned in a few places in the Bible. The elemental things, the rudimental things, you know, is there something that God has created which is not exactly a spirit, because it's not a demonic spirit or an angel spirit or anything, but something which is an elemental thing, which is connected to creation, that actually responds to influence, and it's supposed to respond to our influence, but can be swayed by other influences, apparently. So that's quite an interesting topic which is coming up, you know. And I, you know, because I'm thinking about a lot about the restoration of all things and answering creation's groan and seeing creation set free from its bondage to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God, all those things. How? You know, what mechanism, you know, and what is there that creation responds to? You know, because it seems to have an emotion. You know, a longing is an emotional thing, which seems to be sentient rather than inanimate. So what does respond? You know, what responded when Moses caused the Jordan to dry up, or well, no, to the Red Sea to dry up? What responded in the water? Because it responded to him. What was it that responded? Now, it could have been the molecules and the atoms and stuff, but actually there could be something else. So, you know, the whole Star Wars universe of the Force and the sort of alignment with the Force to the dark side or the light side, and the disturbances that come in the Force, and you know, within that universe, it's obviously something called metachlorians, which are present within the fabric of everything. Maybe that's not quite so far out.
Yeah.
You know? And so, there's a few things around that people have been asking questions about these elemental things, and thinking that, like maybe tree huggers are not quite so out there, because there may well be things that connect, because some of them seem to be connected to trees, forests, quite strongly. And then it reminded me of, Treebeard in the Ents in the Lord of the Rings, that were awoken out of their sleep to, I enjoy sort of exploring various things that are going on out there, because actually it's not enough for me to think, oh, well, this will just happen. It's like, how is it going to happen? How do we choose realities? How do we choose? And if creation is going to respond to our sonship, to the revealing of the sons of God, how? Who are we going to interact with? How are we going to interact with it? How did Jesus turn water into wine? How did he walk on the water? How did he do these? Well, some of them were engaging quantum things, but there may be also other things that are perhaps involved with that. And I think one of them, elementals, may well be one thing that we may need to learn about or understand a little bit more about.
Sure.
So, anyway.
Well, that's so interesting. And I'm interested in knowing how the kingdom of God is manifested within us in such a way that light can emanate from our bodies. And I know that is personally, but it's white light or it's rainbow, or what are the circumstances? What are the issues or facts that lie behind that, the event itself?
I think in terms of light, obviously God is light. And we are made in the image of God, and I believe our spirit and our soul is actually made of light. We are a light being. Now, what is light? Light has lots of connotations, obviously, in terms of color, wavelength. It's not just what we can visibly see, and our spirit isn't something you can visibly see. But doesn't mean that doesn't exist in a way that could be seen. And obviously people do see things which are weird things. So that I think there is a dimension where, again, understanding the frequency, the vibration, when you see in the spirit and you look at people, you can see the color that they are radiating. So everyone radiates a magnetic or electromagnetic field around them. Most of that comes from the heart. So the heart carries a bigger field of energy than most things else, and you can pick up the energy within that field. So Jesus, when he was transfigured, it was like his spirit was releasing its light, or his spirit began to, what's the word, overshadow his body, whatever, so essentially, rather than it being light necessarily bursting out from within him, it was like here was a restoration back to Adam and Eve, whose spirits were on the outside of their body, that hosted their body and soul and were light. And that in this form, that light became visible. And in a visible way, an expression of the spiritual being that we are. And I guess that it was creative light which was seen, whereas normally we're actually looking at always focusing on created light, which is always a reflection. We only see things because there's light reflected off the surface of it. Black is not a color. Black is an absence of reflection. It absorbs light and does not reflect it, so you can't see anything. So you're actually seeing an absence of light, not a color. Technically, black isn't a color. The other colors are reflections, but whatever a material is that shows black absorbs, which is why, you wear white clothes in the summer, because you don't want to absorb heat. You don't want to absorb heat, which is what it does. It doesn't reflect heat. So that's why you would want white stuff, which reflects heat, which brings you cooler conditions. So a lot of these things are sort of, there. I do believe that there's a sense where the more we learn to host our being within our spiritual boundaries, and the more we occupy those boundaries with the right frequencies, I think there, it may well be a physical manifestation of light, which people may be able to see, but they certainly can feel.
Sure.
You can feel the energy fields, and some people are more sensitive to those energy fields than other, but we're responsible for filling those energy fields with the right things, with love, joy, peace, high frequency elements, which actually touch people in a positive way. And so they feel good when they come into our spheres and begin to have this heart to heart connection to us. Because this sort of cardiogenosis, knowledge of the heart, comes because that is expressed in a field of energy, which is just another way of saying light, which is not visible, but is actually still light, and we don't know, of course, whether it was only Peter, James, and John who might have been able to see it, because no one else actually saw it. So we don't know what they saw, or, we know that people that have had cameras seem to be able to catch things that you can't see with the naked eye. So people have been caught with light radiating from them on a camera, which wasn't necessarily seen. I've got pictures of things that we've caught on camera here, which are very clearly orbs of power, which you couldn't see with your natural eyes, but they were caught on camera. So interesting, some of these things about, light, but I think the key is for our spirit to begin to expand and have a wider sphere or around us. And whether that becomes physically manifested at some stage, perhaps it will. But we've got a bit of practice to sort of get it so that that's a way in which we live under in a different way, really, than normally, which requires a flow coming from the inside. Rivers of living water flow from innermost being, which he said are of the spirit. And if we're joined to the Lord in relationship, we become one spirit. So there's a sense where, I think with them should be a manifestation of the Holy Spirit around us, joined to our spirit in oneness, unity, if you like. I think transfiguration really only means metamorphosis, transformation, those words. We tend to think of it, transfiguration, as meaning light, but it doesn't mean light at all. It just means change. But it may be a change in which we change form. We change to actually being an expression of our spirit, not just our physical body, which may mean a change of energy, electromagnetic field around us, which perhaps may be seen in the future. So.
Well, I'm thinking about exciting atoms within ruby rods, and you're moving from one energy level to another one, and to another one. And as the energy level as they recede, then light's emitted. Is that a similar kind of light we're talking about? And if so, how can we embrace or incorporate that in our understanding and embracing?
Well, I think light is such a general term that encompasses a whole load more than just the visible spectrum. So energy really is a vibrational frequency of light. So there is more. You can focus light to such a intense beam that it can cut through anything. Hence laser beams. Well, we've created laser beams technology wise, but actually in the past, man was able to focus energy, light, to do that. Hence building the pyramids and cutting 16 feet blocks of stone perfectly, so that there's no gaps between the pyramid because of the stone fitting perfectly, because they were cut using light and shifted using sound energy. That's how they did it. So there were abilities to use focused light and sound, which are now becoming technologically possible. But by then it was actually a focus of, again, the mind to have control over the elements to be able to do that. So there's a lot more, I think, that probably will be beginning to come into the light. Forget the pun. In the future about these type of things, energy, sources of energy, manifestation of energy, which is organic energy.
Yeah.
I mean, we are human batteries, if you like. We're also amplifiers of sound. Our bodies are designed to produce energy. Well, we may need to focus that, learn how to focus the energy into a tight enough beam to be able to do something. It's like the X-Men, Cyclops in the X-Men, he takes his glasses off and he has X-ray things. Superman has X-ray vision and, that sort of stuff. Well, it may not be beyond the bounds of possibility that we can learn to focus energy like that, to use it as a tool. And I do believe that's what they were able to do in the past. Those abilities have been lost, but maybe they will begin to be recovered. Telekinesis, using the power of focused thought to move things and shift things and teleport things. It's all there. It's just a matter of beginning to sort of see, well, how do I learn to do it? How do I learn to be able to focus my thinking to such a distinct, and therefore can I then focus energy into form of light and sound from the power of my consciousness, not some sort of machine or technology, but much more of an organic way of actually operating.
Sure. And the fact that we're made to love, our bodies, our spirits, our souls are made to love. And do you think as we continue to embrace that within the correct context, that the level of energy that we'll contain and be able to express around us will increase or change? That love can be like a volume control on this, or?
I think ultimately, love carries a frequency which can bring change and transformation. And I think we need to learn to focus the energy that carries in a positive way. And I think, let's not put any limitations on what's possible. Jesus was able to do certain things. He was able to heal people at a distance. So how was he able to heal the servant of the centurion when he wasn't even there? He obviously he did it. He didn't sort of impart it into an apron or a handkerchief like Paul did, but he did something. Was he able to see? Was he able to be there and in where he was at the same time? All these things, once you start letting your mind free from limitations, then all sorts of possibilities begin to come out and the questions start to arise. Because you can just think, oh, it just happened. But I'm not content with it just happened. Because I want to do the things Jesus did, so I need to know how he did it. And if it was just a matter of choice, okay, by choice, I am choosing for the reality of that person being healed at a distance, even though I can't see them physically, then that's okay. But it'd be useful to discover some of the things beneath what Jesus did. And I do have insight into quite a few of them. But there are way more, there are way more things. And of course, the things that Jesus did, most of them weren't recorded. We just got a few examples of what he did. You know, because John said, well, if all the things Jesus did recorded, it would be a lot of books. You know, so in a sense, we only just got a snapshot. Well, Jesus didn't say, you can do the things that I did that are recorded in the Bible. He said, you can do the things that I did and greater things. So that may be things that he didn't do, but also the things that aren't recorded that he did that we can do. Because, of course, people will always limit it to the Bible when it doesn't say that Jesus said, you can do the things that I did that are recorded in the Bible. It just says, you can do the things that I did. So whatever he did, whether recorded or not recorded, we have a mandate to be able to do them. So if we don't know what he did, we need to find out and ask him. Show us some of the other things you did. Give us some insight into, because he could read people's thoughts. He could read the thoughts and intentions and motives of their heart. So he was able to tune in his mind in a telepathic way. So he did things using the power of his conscious mind, and we're supposed to connect with the mind of Christ and have the same sort of mind, operating in sonship and authority and power. So I do think there are, we need to see the limitations removed from our thinking that get us stuck into being less than. We're supposed to be his sons. And that includes all sorts of supernatural abilities and ways and doing things. Jesus levitated back into heaven. It's like, okay, well, what does that give us some leeway to do? But most people just don't think about it. They don't think about all the implications of, Jesus, and being able to know things that had happened, know things that were going to, or possible things that could happen. It's like, oh, well, Satan has desired to sift you, blah, blah, blah. Then it's like, oh, well, I saw you sat under a tree, or, I know what your character is. And there's all these things are all part of, I think, the expanding the reality that we begin to engage with, and therefore the possibilities that we can begin to explore, and removing the limitations of the constructs which have framed our minds and kept us less than what sons should be. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've got to